This week on Faithful Freedom with Teryn Gregson.
The first goal is we want to make sure we get clear on what their view is, okay? And I do this because there's a lot of details. It's not just the thing that they say. There are lots of things that are in package there. Tell me more. This is what we're asking them to do. And the second goal is not only that I understand their views, it's so that they understand their views. And what they end up discovering is they don't understand their own views much of the time. Much of the time, they just don't. And when you ask them for clarification, they kind of, Simon and Garfunkel, they're lost. And this helps them see that their response, rejoinder to our view, maybe not be as well thought out. But what am I doing? No pressure on me. I don't have to be clever. I just want more information. And incidentally, this also, Teryn, in my view, if the believer has no opportunity to go further, they don't have the knowledge, they don't see an angle, they don't see another question they could ask, that's all right. You don't have to.
Do you feel like it's impossible to have a conversation with someone on the other side of an issue than you, someone with a differing opinion than you these days? Well, you're not alone, and that is why we are enlisting author Greg Koukl today, author of Tactics, a game plan for discussing your Christian convictions. He's going to talk to us on how to have those discussions, how to maybe sway the opinion of those in those discussions, and more. So without further ado, let's dive into my discussion with author Greg Koukl. Freedom is non-negotiable. Mandates, free speech, cancel culture, parental rights. These are real people that have stood up for their freedoms no matter what. Welcome into Faithful Freedom with Teryn Gregson, presented by We the Patriots USA, helping everyday Americans defend their God-given rights. I am so delighted to talk to you today because your book, Tactics, was given to me at a ministry retreat, ministry dinner one night, and I couldn't put it down because I thought, wow, this is just so relevant for the day and age in which we live. That does it feel, Greg, like this is needed now more than ever in the climate that we live in, just equipping people to know how to have discourse with one another.
That's right. Productive discourse. And I'll tell you, my publishers pushed back a little bit at the title because it seems so militaristic. And of course, by reading the book that I do not at all promote a bellicose, a kind of warlike, aggressive, nasty kind of manner. I think so many of these discussions, especially in the media, which you are used to, have become almost like a gladiator events, and who can draw the first blood and the most blood and all that. And this is not my spirit at all. It's not the project of Tactics. However, I think it's appropriate because Tactics, the word means the kind of, it's, I almost said the hand-to-hand combat. It's the face-to-face engagement. Mm-hmm. You have your strategy for D-Day. That's that big thing, Operation Overlord. But when you hit the beach, that's when tactics come in. You got to deal with the specific things in front of you. And in fact, we are in a kind of a cultural battle and a spiritual battle. And this is very clear in Ephesians chapter 6. So this means we have to be shrewd. And this is what Jesus said. We're gentle, but we're to be shrewd. And so I think the tactical approach that developed over many years, just of my engagement, I've been on more than 80 college and university campuses here and abroad. I've spoken on 6 different continents. I haven't been invited to Antarctica yet, but I probably never will be. And I've been doing interactive talk radio for 33 years. And so as time went on, I began to change the way I engage so it's not so shrill, and it's more thoughtful, and therefore more gracious and effective. And that's really the genesis of the tactical approach.
And your show, Stand to Reason, just celebrating its 29th anniversary. So you have been in this game of tactics, like you said, for several years. You've had some pretty famous debates out there as well. Do you feel like the tension in the air is at its highest that it's been in those years that you've been doing this?
Yeah, the 29 years is for the organization. I've been in radio for 33 years, so I was already in for 4 years before the organization started in 1993, May 1st. Just a few days ago is the anniversary. And so we've got a team of 18 people, speakers and background people and graphic artists and filmmakers and all that other stuff. And str.org is the place that people can go if they want to benefit from it. But you are absolutely right. I never anticipated the level of hostility towards Christianity and Christians on a cultural level that we're experiencing now. Now, this doesn't mean that every person's neighbor who is not a Christian is going to be barking at the believers. And for the most part, my interaction, I live in Southern California. People are asking me, just did last weekend, I'm in Michigan. They say, oh my gosh, what's it like to be a born again Christian? And so it's probably no different than anywhere else, frankly. People are nice. But when you think about the ideological discussion, and this is what forms trends and influences policy, the academy, the news media, Hollywood, the school system, okay? When I say the academy, I mean universities, but no, it's the whole school system all the way down to K is being deeply and aggressively indoctrinated by the left. All right. This new shakeup with SCOTUS, Supreme Court, and this leak that we had, Alito's draft the other day. Right after that, Amazon declared that anyone on their staff who wants to go out of state to get an abortion, they will pay $4,000 of medical expenses. So, wow, they can do what they want with their money. I don't like the idea, but that's their business. But it tells you something about the cultural moment, and just that this piece would be leaked at a time when that has never been done before in history, that the Supreme Court has been compromised. That's supposed to be politically neutral, and all of a sudden, bam, everybody knows what's been happening the last few days since that leak. So it is a bellwether of an intensely culturally hostile environment to people who hold a Christian worldview. And I just want to emphasize this, Teryn, because it's not just they hate Jesus and they don't like the gospel. They hate the Jesus of the Gospels, but they like Jesus of their own invention and their own imagination, the social justice Jesus, who doesn't exist and never did. Mm-hmm. But what's going on here is, if you look at the world God created and the way he organized the world for the purpose of human flourishing, he made a good world working together a certain way. Male and female, he created them. Be fruitful, multiply, subdue the earth. Okay. When Jesus talks about divorce and remarriage, Matthew 19, he goes right back to the original created order. And he says, basically, to sum up his point, one man with one woman becoming one flesh, which is sex, meaning sex is in that committed relationship for one lifetime. Okay. You think about that, just small group of things, all of that is being hammered now. That covers gender dysphoria, transsexuality, homosexuality, bestiality, fornication, adultery, binary genders, and be fruitful, multiply. Well, we're killing a lot of children, millions of children. It was actually at the rate of the same amount of deaths per day as people died on 9/11, 2,977. That was about how many people every single day for years and years and years. Babies were being sacrificed because of abortion. So the point I'm making is, this is a very broad-based challenge on God's world and God's way, not just on the gospel, which is also a huge target.
Do you think, having said all of that, that the moment is unique in what we've experienced in the past, because no longer are we arguing over the specifics of the truth? We're arguing there's basically two different parties here, one that believes in the truth and the other that is saying that there is no truth, that there's an absence of truth, basically.
Yeah, if what you're saying parties, you mean more ideological parties as opposed to political, I think you're right. You have those who are on the left No, that's very interesting, Teryn, because that is kind of a battle cry of the left. There is no truth, so you can't claim your truth has some kind of authority over me. But the claim that there is no truth is a truth claim. All
Sure.
right. And the claim that your view has no authority over me is not just a truth claim, but is a moral truth claim. They're not just stating a fact. They're saying you should not be pushing your views on me. Well, wait a minute. In a relativistic society where there is no truth, especially moral truth, right out of their mouths come a claim of truth and a claim of moral truth that they impose upon other people who don't agree with them. So how does that happen? In the tactics book, there is a chapter about a tactic I call Inside Out. And the point of that chapter is God has made human beings a certain way. We live in God's world. Human beings are made in the image of God. And even when they try to deny the realities of the way the world is structured, the nature of reality that God made, even when they deny it, they can't help affirming it. So what's inside of them comes out even when they don't realize it. Part of the tactic is just, now we just listen and then we ask a question of, wait a minute, I'm confused now. You said there is no morality, therefore it's wrong for me to push my morality on you. If there's no morality, how can it be wrong what I'm doing? Help me understand that. Okay. Now, this is also employing the suicide tactic you know from the book, but notice how I'm using questions and I'm maneuvering in that way, and then the ball's back in their court, and now they have to give an account for something that they've never thought about before. But this is part of the value of the broader tactical game plan.
Yeah, and I want to dive into some of these tactics and equip people with these tools in these discussions. And this has to be my favorite tactic that I read in the book. Let's talk a little bit more about that. How we ask, instead of coming back with combative answers, as you said. I think that this is really one of the biggest light bulb moments that I had was, let's flip the script on the person that you're having that discussion with.
Right.
Ask them, like you said, in a non-combative manner, in a nice manner, a question about what they believe. So they have to not only, tell it to you, but they have to digest it themselves. Okay. And think on a personal level, think it out, because I think that so many people don't even sit and logically put together why they have these ideas or these thoughts.
This is absolutely true. In fact, I had a Q&A. I was in Detroit area, actually just north of Ann Arbor last weekend. And during the Q&A in a church group, we were talking about the resurrection, whether the disciples lied about what they saw. They thought they saw Jesus, and they were lying about it. And that doesn't make any sense, because nobody's going to suffer what they suffered if they know that their view is a lie. A lot of people die for a lie. They don't know it. But these guys would have known it. And somebody asked me, he said, well, maybe they had a hidden agenda. Maybe they had a hidden agenda. And that's why they would be willing to suffer for the lie they knew was a lie. Okay, I said, that's possible. What would that agenda be? Crickets. Dead
That was
air.
my first question. What's that
Yeah,
agenda?
what would the okay, I'm open. Let me know. What do you think an agenda would be? He had absolutely no idea. And by the way, this happens a lot where people just kind of throw things out. And if they are not, and what they're thinking is, if I can imagine something contrary to the Christian claim, then my imagination, my story, I call these bedtime stories because I meant to put your ideas to bed. They're not justified in any way. But notice my response. I didn't say, no, that's not true. They had no other agenda. Because strictly speaking, I can't know if they had another agenda. I mean, I could read the accounts tonight because I don't see any reason. But instead of preaching at him, I just used a question that was appropriate to the challenge, and it was over with. Just like that. And I wasn't being a meanie or anything. There he is, flat-footed. And I wasn't tricking him. This was a legitimate and fair question, as people listening now would know. Now, what I was using, and this is what you said was your favorite tactic, it's really the core of the game plan. So the subtitle of the tactics book is a game plan for discussing your Christian convictions. And I start with the plan, and it has a name as a tactic, but the other tactics are meant to aid and abet the game plan. I mentioned suicide tactic, self-refuting claims. I mentioned inside out. Okay, those are, the inside things that are the truth about the world come out even when people don't want to express it. They do. So this allows you to see things, but now how do you take advantage of self-refuting statements or the inside out circumstance? This is where the game plan comes in, and it's a question asking technique. And for me, this was just like you mentioned, Teryn, that was the biggest shift in my own approach. Instead of preaching, instead of trying to refute, instead of arguing, now I use questions in a very particular kind of way. The game plan is 3 steps and are all around questions, so it's very accessible. But I should say this, I learned this partly in practice. Jesus asked lots of questions, over 300 of them in the Gospels. The idea of the Socratic method goes back to Socrates 400 years before Jesus, so nothing clever on Koukl's part here. But I employ a TV icon to help people get a picture of what I'm talking about. And the icon is a man named Lieutenant Columbo, who just this last year, 50th anniversary of the TV show, and lots of young people have no idea who he is, obviously. But I have not visited a country where I have taught on tactics. And people did not know who. There weren't people in the audience who knew who Columbo was. So sometimes I have to explain the story. But he's a guy who shows up at the crime scene, and he's got a rumpled trench coat, and he's got a cigar in his hand, and he's always scratching his head and mumbling to himself. And he's the detective, but he looks like he's always confused. And so he's got to ask questions. He's like, I don't know, something about this thing bothers me, and then he asks a question. He gets a little piece of information. They said, hey, one more thing, and then one more things him to death with more and more questions. Pretty soon, as he's assembling this information, he's just maneuvering without scaring people because he's stupid like a fox, right? He just comes in under the radar and, okay, oh, you're very smart. Okay, wait a minute, I don't get this. So there's that pattern or the technique of the way you use the questions. And so this is the way that I have constructed the game plan to teach Christians to use questions in that way. Relaxed, mellow, non-confrontational. I'm confused about this thing. You said you're an atheist, right? Yes, absolutely. So, but you think the God of the Bible is immoral? Yes. Okay, I'm curious. As an atheist, you're a materialistic atheist. So where are you getting your ideas or your standard of moral and immoral that you're imposing on God? How does that work? Okay, all I'm doing is asking for more information. But I also have enough knowledge myself to know that they're in a bind with their point. Okay, and so how do I exploit that? I could say, hey, you're an atheist. You have no morality inherent to your view. You can't impose morality on God when you don't even believe in that kind of stuff. Now, that would be true, but it was very inelegant in the way I do it. Notice the way I just role-played it is a very different feel. And incidentally, notice also that when I ask the question, I'm tossing the ball into somebody else's court, and it's not my job to talk. It's their job to talk. What are they going to say? Lots of times I get, this is 60s alert here, Teryn. So those are my days, 50s, 60s. I get what I call a Simon and Garfunkel moment. And these are these performers that are fabulous guys. 1966 wrote a song called The Sounds of Silence. And so you ask a question and they don't know what to say. And the reason is, you hinted at this a few moments ago, Teryn, they have not thought about their own view. They have been socialized to say certain things that have stonewalled Christians. And so when believers learn how to maneuver there with some simple questions, it changes the entire dynamic. By the way, as a sports broadcaster yourself, this is a huge part of what you do. you're questioning athletes, or you used to question athletes, but you have in your mind a series of questions that are meant to direct the conversation. So even though they're doing most of the talking, you are actually in the driver's seat of the conversation, just like you are now. I'm doing the heavy lifting, you're all relaxed, but I'm going in the direction that you determine by your questions, and that's part of the virtue of the tactical approach.
And I think you have a good point there. And what makes someone a good interviewer, and my profession as a broadcaster, and in this case, just someone, putting their apologetics to work here and exercising that, is that you listen to what they say instead of having in your head your next question, what you want to say. Some people
Right.
do that. They don't even listen to what that person's saying. And so they can't even pull those little bits out and have them expand upon it. I think you're very wise to tell people, okay, you have to listen to what they're saying in order to be able to ask that question and turn the tables on them.
Yeah, let me give an illustration of that, and this will give an introduction to the game plan, because I said there's 3 steps, and a lot of Christians are thinking witnessing, interacting, we're trying to lead people to Christ. Well, I mean, ultimately that's the end game, way out there. But I tell people, do not even think about that when you're in a conversation with people. Don't try to swing for the fences. Don't try to, close the deal, get them to sign on the dotted line. All of that, praying to receive Christ approach, frankly, is historically new. They didn't do that in the New Testament, not in the book of Acts. They preached the word. They engaged people, and then people then believed based on the work of the Holy Spirit and the information that was given to them. I'm not against that. I'm just simply saying it's not obligatory. So this frees us up now to initially think of just one thing. So this is the first step. I tell people, don't worry about what's coming. You don't know questions, challenges. You don't even know if they're a Christian yet in many cases. You travel, I'm sure you're sitting next to people on the airplane, whatever. What's the first step? The first step is to gather information. That's it. Gather information. Now, if your goal is to gather information, you can't be thinking down the line. That's a distraction. You have to listen. And what you're listening for is the content of their view. And that's the first step. What is it? What is it? In fact, the first question is, what do you mean by that? Now, there's a very general question. It can be expressed in a lot of different ways. And when I did that little role play about, God of the Bible's atheists saying the God of the Bible is immoral, my response was simply a variation of, what do you mean by, I'm confused. How does that work? You don't believe in this, and then you say this. Help me out. What am I missing? So those are all variations of a very simple question. What do you mean by that? And the goal is, the first goal is, we want to make sure we get clear on what their view is. Okay, and I do this because there's a lot of details. It's not just the thing that they say. There are lots of things that are in package there. Tell me more. This is what we're asking them to do. And the second goal is not only that I understand their views, it's so that they understand their views. And what they end up discovering is they don't understand their own views much of the time. Much of the time, they just don't. And when you ask them for clarification, they kind of, Simon and Garfunkel, they're lost. And this helps them see that their response, rejoinder to our view, maybe not be as well thought out. But what am I doing? No pressure on me. I don't have to be clever. I just want more information. And incidentally, this also, Teryn, in my view, if the believer has no opportunity to go further, they don't have the knowledge, they don't see an angle, they don't see another question they could ask, that's all right. You don't have to. Just relax. If you can't get past the first step, no problem. What I've discovered is there are lots of circumstances when that question, some variation of what do you mean by that, completely takes the wind out of the sails of the person that's all huffing and puffing about their own ideas. And again, there's no pressure. And so just the questions, and I have lots of stories. We don't have time to go into it now, but I got lots of stories where just asking, what do you mean by that, ended up being used by the Holy Spirit, I think, to actually make a difference in the conversation.
Taking a quick break to encourage you to head over to wethepatriotsusa.org. This is how you can get directly involved in the fight for our freedoms. Hit the donation tab on the homepage. Your tax-deductible gift will assist this 501c3 organization working to protect religious freedom, medical freedom, parental rights, educational freedom, First and Second Amendment freedoms, and so much more. Head to wethepatriotsusa.org now. And now back to my discussion with Gregory Koukl. I think that that's an excellent point, and one that you made earlier too, by saying that there's no pressure. We know from the Bible that yes, the Great Commission is our responsibility to go out and to, share the gospel, but at the end of the day, it's only the Holy Spirit and God's work within someone that can change their heart and into flesh. And so I think that's an important point that you make to people, because you have no idea. And especially if you talk to people that are in youth ministry, in particular, those people don't ever see the fruit of their work, right? They have no idea what sort of seeds they might be planting into a young child, just the same way someone would have no idea what seed you planted by simply just asking someone a question that they have to then, then digest themselves.
So you use the phrase plant a seed, and I'm totally in agreement with that notion, but I use a different metaphor, as you know, in the book, and I say put a stone in their shoe. And the reason I use that metaphor, I like it. Maybe I'm a guy, a seed, plant a seed, wait a minute. Now, I don't want to do that. I want to put a stone in their shoe. In other words, and I tell this to audiences, every time I speak to a secular audience, I tell them right up front, I'm not here to convert you. I just want to put a stone in your shoe. In other words, I just want to annoy you a little bit in a good way. And so you're chuckling. That's what happens when I say that to them. They start chuckling because
it's very clever and it's good.
Yeah, they expect the Christian to annoy them. So I say, okay, I'm your guy. But I want to annoy you in a good way. I want you walking out of the auditorium thinking about something that I said. You may not get everything. It might not mean, but there might be something that's the stone in your shoe, and I want you hobbling out, because I think Jesus of Nazareth is worth thinking about. And then after that introduction, I go into my material, whatever lecture or talk or I'm giving at that particular point. But what I've done is I've put the audience at ease a little bit. I told them, here's what I'm about here. Okay, no problem. Just relax. But it also made it easier for me. I've lowered the bar for myself. Because I don't have the obligation to cover every single thing and answer every single challenge and see if I can get them to have an altar call or something. I never do an altar call or anything like that. I hope towards the end, if I can get to the gospel in some clear sense, I will, but not always. Because Jesus didn't get to the gospel in every conversation. Lots of times he just communicated the bad news, right? Sermon on the Mount. That's a lot of bad, especially chapter 5. It's all bad news. You got the Beatitudes. Oh, those are sweet. And then he goes, okay, the law, you can't get rid of that thing. Okay, you're not going to get rid. In fact, you got to be better than the scribes and Pharisees. And, oh, you don't murder. Good for you. Did you ever call your brother an idiot? Oh, you're going to hell. Oh, you didn't commit adultery? Good for you. You ever think about it? Guys, you're all going to hell. That's the message. That's Jesus. And I mean, my paraphrase, but that's the content. Bad news. So we ought not be under the compulsion in our conversations to get the gospel in its fullness out every time. That is not the New Testament pattern, all right? We meet the need that's there. Now, I call this gardening as opposed to harvesting. All of our evangelism techniques are really geared on harvesting. And that's why they got the prayer at the end. Not objecting to that, but there's an oversimplification of the gospel there, when nowadays, for a lot of people, that oversimplification just sounds like religious noise. They don't know anything about it. And so we need to touch base with them on the obstacle that's keeping them from considering, or obstacles, from considering the gospel as it's communicated in the text. Bad news and good news. So the good news is not good without the bad. Okay. Nobody in the book of Acts, by the way, not a single person, 13 different times the gospel is preached, talked about the love of God. None of them. Now, this is a shocker, but look it up. The word love doesn't appear in the book of Acts. It manifests there but it's not spoken about. And these are the people who Jesus personally trained to take the gospel, and they had a different approach. So people might want to look that up and see what they had to say in these different circumstances. My point simply is that we can try to meet the need, do a little gardening here and there, and I think the harvest takes care of itself as the Holy Spirit works in people's lives. No altar calls in the book of Acts either. The gospel's preached. So there are times when either parts of the gospel or things pertaining to the obstacles that are in the way to get to the gospel can be addressed by a Christian. So if I'm removing an obstacle, maybe I'm not giving the gospel to that, but maybe Teryn, you do to that person down the line. And frankly, I have lots of stories of people who were in my garden that later became Christians. And J. Warner Wallace, you know Jim Wallace?
Mm-hmm.
Cold Case Christianity. Jim was in my garden when he was an atheist.
Wow.
All right. Abdu Murray. Okay. Abdu, I just had dinner with him last weekend. I've known him a long time, but I found out about him, and he's written 3 or 4 books. He's an apologist. He's got his own organization called Follow the Truth, and he's out of Detroit. And when he was a Muslim, he was in my garden. Wow. I didn't harvest that fruit. Somebody went into my garden and harvested my fruit, right? Get out of my garden. No, I don't care.
But it all started with one simple question or a few simple questions.
It's just, well, in those cases, it was my role in not trying to lead them to Christ, but just gardening in my way of life and in my own broadcast and our other things that we do at Stand to Reason. And so I'm gardening in their lives. And one way in conversation to simply think about gardening that's easy is the one simple question. So most people don't have a radio show or a TV show or a podcast or something like that. They don't have the kind of footprint that you and I may have, but they have their own footprint. And so they can use the same techniques, using the tactical game plan to get into conversations in a relaxed way, and beginning with just drawing people out and becoming a student of other people's ideas, listening. And when you listen, now you're getting a picture, and you may see something that's ambiguous you can ask another question about to get more information. And that's the first step. And it's amazing how effective it can be, even if you don't go any further. Anybody can do this.
And again, the book, for those that are watching us on Rumble, you can see the book cover I'm holding up right now. It's called Tactics, A Game Plan for Discussing Your Christian Convictions by Greg Koukl. And one part of this book in one of the chapters, it's called Taking the Roof Off Tactic. And I want to talk about this because what happens if we come to a standstill, that we ask that question, they don't seem to really want to play that game. And if anything, they walk away offended. I think that this is a message that we as Christians need to learn how to communicate with other people, and that even if we don't agree with you and your lifestyle or the sin that we might be pointing out, whether it's homosexuality or abortion or anything like that, we all recognize that we're all sinners. So that I think so many people now, that are a part of maybe the LGBTQ movement or things like that, they automatically take your disagreement as hatred toward them.
Yes, that's
right.
And
that could be not farther from the truth.
Right, I agree. So there's actually a whole bunch that's going on there. Let me say just very quickly, when I am sharing Christ with somebody, and it's an evangelism moment, all right, I never make any particular sin an issue. Because if they don't have one sin, they got another one. You said it, we're all sinners. So the big thing is that they're in their life, whatever their life is like, they are still in rebellion against God. And so that's the main issue. Now, sometimes others will make some other issue the issue. Secondly, based from what you said, I have actually never have anybody walk away from me in virtue of asking them questions and using the Columbo tactic. Never. Because what am I doing? I'm drawing them out, asking their view. People want to give their views. It's polite to do that, especially if I'm polite in the process, okay? So I've never had that. Now, there have been people in conversations who walked away, but not because I was asking them questions. That wasn't what they took offense at. Okay. Pardon me. And so you mentioned, though, a tactic called taking the roof off. And this is a tactic. You can't use any tactic with people walking away because they're done. And I just let them go. But taking the roof off is a tactic in which you take the person's point of view seriously for the sake of argument. So you say, well, let's see if you're right. Let's say you're right, okay? And then you show where that point of view leads logically. This is also known as a reductio or a reductio ad absurdum. You reduce it to the absurd. Now, if you follow that route and it drives you off a cliff, there must be something wrong with where you started. Okay, let me give an illustration. It's the easiest. And this is in the first chapter of the book, where I had a conversation with a witch in Wisconsin. But it turned out our conversation, and she's a vendor. She's doing some stuff for me. So I saw this jewelry she had that was a character pagan, basically. And I asked her about it. And she said, yeah, I'm a pagan. And then I asked her, are you a witch? She said, yes, I am. We respect all life. And so I said, oh, that would make you pro-life. She said, no, I'm pro-choice. Well, isn't it weird for a witch to be pro-choice because of their theology? She said, yeah, it is. And then she went on to defend her view. I would never kill a baby. By the way, that was her language, not mine. I would never kill a baby. And then I said, okay, well, that's good. Well, maybe we should stop other people from killing babies. Again, I'm trading now on her language. All right. She's already acknowledged that abortion is baby killing. But when she says there's a justification for killing babies by incest, the justification is incest. Okay, now I have a kind of a rule that she just gave. Okay, it's okay to kill babies that are conceived by incest. Okay, now when you think about that, that's pretty bizarre. All right, but she's not seeing it because she's just rattling off slogans and not thinking about what she's saying. So now I'm going to take the roof off. I said, let me see if I understand your view correctly. If I had a 2-year-old standing next to me, or a 1-year-old, or a 6-month-old, who had been conceived by incest, then on your view, I should be allowed to kill this baby. Is that right? So now notice I'm taking her rule and applying it to a clear case counterexample where kill the 6-month-old, the 1-year-old, the 2-year-old? That's crazy. Okay, well, if it's crazy, then there's something wrong with your rule because that's an application that's fair given your rule. And by the way, I gave her an opportunity to correct me if I was mistaken. But I wasn't mistaken about a rule. And that stopped her in her tracks, and she's thinking about it. But that's an example of taking the roof off. I got this idea from Francis Schaeffer, who has had a big influence on me. Now, he died in the 80s. But I read his books, and that terminology, take the roof off, is his. The idea is that people are all comfortable in their foolish ideas. And so you take the roof off and let the cold wind blow. You know, you show them this is what your idea results in. This is where it goes. Is this a good idea? You think it's a good idea? You want to defend that? Now, if you don't think this is a right application of your idea, then how can you defend the idea itself? That's kind of the general sense of things. I remember, since you mentioned LBGT, there was a fellow who called in on the show many years ago, and he said, there's nothing wrong with me being gay because I'm not hurting anybody. And I said, have you told your parents about your same-sex attraction? Yeah. Did it hurt them? Yeah. Well, then you are hurting somebody. No, I'm not accusing him. I'm just trying to get this out. It's okay if I'm not hurting anybody. That's the rule. But wait a minute, you are hurting somebody. So why doesn't that factor in? Okay, that's just another example of taking the roof off. There's more I needed to say with him, but that's why I'm starting. Okay, and what ends up happening, Teryn, what's going on behind the scenes in their minds is they are not committed to doing the right thing. They are committed to doing what they want. And then they come up with these rationales that are meant to sanitize their behavior. Well, my thing that I want to do is okay because. And so then you go after the because, and it turns out that's not a good because. It's not going to work. But you've got to see that, of course. And in the case that I just described, I was using Columbo number 3. The third step, which is a little more advanced, I was using questions to make a point. In this case, I was trying, and with which I was trying to show a weakness or a flaw in her view. Now, the other tactics, like taking the roof off and suicide and Inside Out and Just the Facts, Ma'am, and Road Scholar, these are all maneuvers to help you see what's wrong. Then you use the questions to try to help them to see what's wrong. But using the questions softens the whole conversation. It's an interactive thing, and it gives you a lot of resting time while they're trying to answer the questions that you pose to them. And it becomes very, very effective to get them thinking. Okay? And that's what's fabulous about the approach.
What do you have to say to all of those that are out there thinking, okay, Greg, this is all really fascinating, and I think that it's wonderful, but we are well past that point in time that we have to play nice. These people don't even, they find every way to justify the way that they think. It is time to really just put the hammer down and not be nice anymore. What do you have to say to those people?
If you're talking now, see, I think you have a foot in two different worlds with what you do. So when you're talking about the political policy arena, I think that's too much gladiator stuff, but that's going to be more aggressive. I understand that. Okay. But interpersonally, even on those issues, then it's going to, if you're going to get in somebody's face, even on a policy issue, if anybody gets mad, we lose.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we don't want them to get mad at us because they're not going to be in a persuasive mood. Okay, but when it comes to the gospel, we can't do that because we are obliged by God to be virtuous. Paul says in Colossians 4, he tells us to be ready, make the most of the opportunity, and then he says, let your speech always be with grace, seasoned as it were with salt. 1 Peter chapter 3, the verse that apologists camp on, always be ready to give an answer for the hope that's within you. I probably didn't quote that quite right. But anyway, yet with gentleness and reverence. Okay, 2 Timothy chapter 2, the Lord's bondservant must not be quarrelsome, but patient when wronged. And that's an evangelism passage there because he said that maybe God will grant them repentance, having been held captive by the devil to do his will. There's a powerful spiritual dimension here that only the Holy Spirit can overcome. But what is our posture? Time and time again, we're told to be gracious and virtuous. Incidentally, that's not just virtue before God. It's also good tactical maneuvering. When you're gracious, when you're calm, and you're not yelling, you sound more persuasive. You sound more confident in your view. I mean, there's an old line, it's from Shakespeare, lots of good ones from Shakespeare. But the line is, methinks thou dost protest too much. In other words, if you're working really hard, screaming and yelling, it takes persuasiveness out of your presentation. Or as the old saw goes, when you have a weak point, pound the podium, right? People pick up on this, maybe even subconsciously. If we're mellow, if we're gracious, in the midst of attack, it is obligatory and virtuous before the Lord, but it is also increases our effectiveness. And this is something, once we realize it, helps us to calm down. Now, all of this that I'm telling you, this is not Mr. Koukl's nature. All right. I'm 48 years a Christian, and I've had to work. I was a total loose cannon for the first 10 years. And I still have my temptations in the wrong direction. So I'm sympathetic to people who get wound up. But I'm just saying, before the Lord, we can't lower the hammer in that way. We can make our points aggressively. We can make them incisively. We can make them persuasively. But I think the best and most effective way to do it is to marshal questions to accomplish that. And it doesn't matter what, look at, the same-sex marriage, marriage equality. So this is a rhetorical flourish by the other side. We believe it. You don't believe in marriage equality? Well, I can hammer back with a lot of policy points regarding this whole thing. We got it all worked out at Stand to Reason. We got lots and lots of stuff to say that's sound. But here's my thing. You don't believe in marriage equality? Well, let me ask you a question. What's that? Do you think that children should get married? No. Well, then you don't believe in marriage equality either, do you? Well, that's different. Oh, okay. It is different. But the point I'm making is it's just not a blanket, everybody should have the equal chance to get married. So now the question is, what is it that qualifies for a legitimate marriage? What is a marriage? Oh, well, love makes marriage. Okay. Do you know married people that are not in love? Yeah. Are they not married anymore? No, they're still married. Oh, okay, well then love doesn't make marriage. It's something else. If I've misunderstood you, let me know. So there you go. That is a charged issue, but notice how in this little role play, I'm navigating with my questions. Now, why was I able to do that? Partly because I saw something on TV where the guy did this marriage equality line to somebody else, and it stumped him. And I thought, well, if he asked me that, what would I say? And I had to work it out in advance. What question I would ask back to him to exploit the problem with that view, the rhetorical force of it, and take the wind out of his sails. Okay? So it's not so easy as just saying marriage equality. This is a complex issue, and it needs more refinement. Okay, so I was able to dodge the rhetorical move, and now we can get more specifically into the question of what is a marriage, whatever. And there's a lot of controversy about that, but I was just using this as an example to see how even that kind of issue can be managed. You can navigate on that. And by the way, you know this. In the book I got my own copy right here. Mm-hmm. In the book there's gazillions of illustrations and conversations that I've actually had with people one-on-one or on radio or on TV. I did a national debate with Deepak Chopra on TV for an hour. I've debated Michael Shermer on 3 hours on radio, on national radio, 3 hours, and lots of other things. So I've been around the block. And so I want to share with people the way these kinds of things actually work themselves out in very real life situations.
And it's so very helpful. So people should pick up the book and dive into it, because you make a good point there, in that you really do need to be prepared. You have to do the work ahead of time so that when you are faced with these conversations and these debates, that you are equipped and you do have the proper answers, and that you're not the one that the question gets flipped on and you don't have a proper logical answer to give. Right. I think that's people do need to do their homework. That's part of what apologetics is all about, is being able to do that. But, I also want to say I do agree with you in that, and that we do have to continue to be gracious and merciful when we have these conversations with people, even in such a hostile environment that we all feel that we live in now. Because you tell me how you think about this. I think that we got to where we are today, not because we weren't forceful enough, but because we didn't even have these conversations at all. We, for so long, as Christians, in many cases, kept our mouths shut. We let them do what they wanted to do. We didn't want to ruffle feathers, and we just were like, yeah, you're right. You can do whatever you want to do. Yeah,
I think that is a problem, but I actually think it's more complex than that. The ideas, the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age is something that comes into existence, if you will, as a result of a very, very long process. And I'm saying hundreds of years. So there are ideas even in the 19th century that began taking root, say, in the academy. Okay, that then began the universities, philosophers, who knows about the Frankfurt School, but this is a huge, in the early 20th century, but this is a huge influence on critical race theory, which is everywhere now, or DEI. I got to get the right acronym, otherwise I spelled die. So it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. Mm-hmm. But so there are all kinds of things. So I'm sympathetic to the fact that a lot of Christians are looking around and say, holy cow, how do we get here? Well, these guys had a plan. and they put it into place, and there's infiltration. And it's not a conspiracy thing. It's been out there. You get Rules for
Absolutely.
Radicals that was written in the 60s, for example. These guys, and get this, then get this. LGBT crowd, they had a whole plan, and little by little, 50 years later, now the world's different, and it catches Christians by surprise. Then they don't know how to deal with it because it seems like the ideas are too sophisticated for them to understand and to push back against. That's one thing. Secondly, the left is very aggressive, and they punish people. Literally, they punish people who don't agree. So it isn't like an even playing field. Plus, they're masters of the rhetoric. And then, you don't believe in marriage equality? What's the abortion thing now? Now it's reproductive justice. So they've changed the language, Just as an observation, anytime anyone adds an adjective to the word justice, they pervert it. Justice is fine just the way it is. But all of these adjectives, whether it's reproductive justice or sexual justice or social justice, these are all perversions. When you look at how it plays out, it actually perverts genuine justice. Let me toss something in here before we run out of time, though, Teryn, because what you mentioned a few moments ago, which is really legitimate, that we kind of have to do our homework, and we got to be alert to some of these kind of things. Sometimes that scares people away because they think, I got my hands full, my family, my job, and everything. I can't do a deep dive into apologetics or theology or politics or philosophy. Okay, here's what I want to say to you. If you get the book, I mentioned there are 3 steps to the Columbo tactic. The first 2 steps, you are in the shallow end of the pool. You are ankle deep. It is very easy. And in my view, you are not committed to going the distance with anyone. You don't know what the distance even looks like with anyone. I mentioned the first step. You're going to draw people out, use some form of the question, what do you mean by that? And you're going to get an idea of what their view is. There is no challenge to you in that because you're not putting your view out. If they say, what's your view? You say, well, I'd rather not share it right now, but I am interested in what you think. Let them talk. Now you're going to get an education on their view. No pressure on you. Okay? Easy. What's the second step? The second step I call reversing the burden of proof, but simply it means once they tell you what their view is, you want to know why they think that view is true or accurate. You want the reasons for it. Now, again, you're still ankle deep in the pool. You're gathering a different kind of information, the reason for their views. So you get their view and their reason for the view. Okay, and now you get a very robust understanding of their view. What commitment do you have to refute their view at this point? None. None. So I'm taking the pressure off for everybody, but I know something they don't know. I know if you ask them, what do you mean by that, draw it out, or how did you come to that conclusion? Second question. Or what are your reasons for that, or why do you think that's actually true? You ask those 2 questions without even advancing your view, you're going to make headway in a person's life. The Holy Spirit's going to use that. I got all kinds of examples of that happening in my own life and other people's lives. So for those who might feel a little more timid, what I want you to think about is don't worry about harvesting. Just try to do a little gardening. How do you garden? You get off the bench and you start asking a couple of questions. You ask, what do you mean by that? Or some variation. Or you ask, okay, what are your reasons for that? Or some variation. And you're going to make headway. You're going to get an education. You're going to realize people are not as scary as you thought. And you're also going to learn that people are not as smart as you thought. And I'm not dissing anybody. But we think, just like the spies there in Numbers, we felt like grasshoppers in our own sight. There's the giants. We felt in our own sight. It was a self-image problem, And sometimes we look at those on the outside. Oh, they're so smart. I could never talk with them. Then you start letting them talk a little bit, responding to those 2 questions. And you go, really? That's what you got? Okay, so you don't have to say that to them. But there is a realization that I thought you could do better than that, Maybe they may be smart people, but when it comes to spiritual things, they make basic mistakes. And this is what you end up seeing. My encouragement then is just get into play. You don't have to swing for the fences. You don't even have to get on base. Just get in the batter's box. And using just the first 2 questions will allow you to do that effectively. Trust me.
100%. And just to reemphasize what you're saying there too, and that, they might come at you with fancy words, or they maybe have been shifting the language that they've been using. But as you said, it's easy to peel back the layers on that if you try. And the root is still the same, even if they've changed the language on it. The root of all of that is still the same. Well, I could sit and talk to you all day about this. I think it's just so fascinating and I love it. But I know we're at the end of our time here. So can you tell people how they can follow you and where they can catch you?
Sure. Stand to Reason is the organization that I founded 29 years ago. Now we have 4 full-time speakers. We have 18 or 19 staff. I lose count. But so STR, which is the acronym for Stand to Reason, .org, str.org is our website. Very easy to get to. And I used to say we got hundreds of articles and hundreds of videos. Now we got thousands. I mean, it is a very robust place and a good search feature. So you can find all kinds of videos and training stuff. You can also podcast my own broadcast, which is 2 hours a week. And there I take calls in. And then there's another podcast I do with Amy Hall called STR Ask. And there's your young apologist in making right there. So a little towhead there. That's as much as I can see. And there's another podcast called #STR Ask, and this is when people have sent questions in. So now I got a partner. She's the host, and she reads the questions that are short, and then I respond, she responds. So it's both of them are really worthwhile. And between the two of them, it's only 3 hours a week of podcasting, and that's just my commute to the office and back. Okay, that's all it is. So it's not demanding. But I think people will find that the issues that we deal with there are current, they're pressing, and they flummox a lot of Christians. They do not know how to navigate. And we are there at Stand to Reason to help our community be a better ambassador for Christ. And we have very careful understanding about what that looks like. That's our model building. It's an incarnational model. I encourage, if they go to str.org, to go to the bottom of the page, and there's a subscribe area. Put in your email address and some other stuff, and we will send you free training material every single month. So we'll send it snail mail if you want, or we'll send it usually digitally. I just wrote 2 articles, and this is what comes out on what I call the heathen and the unknown God. But the question is, what about those people who never heard? Well, there's a lot of theology that applies to that to be able to answer it correctly. So I have 2 separate articles, part 1 and part 2. Those are the last 2 I wrote to deal with that. At the end of last year, I wrote a piece called The Legend of the Social Justice Jesus. Turns out you can look at in every word in every gospel, and you will not find Jesus advocating anywhere for the financially poor and destitute, or for the outcast as a group. It's a complete misunderstanding. It's not why he said he came. I'm just saying that's the quality of stuff people will receive for free when they sign up and subscribe at the bottom of the homepage at str.org.
Well, thank you so much. I've got a crying kid here now.
Oh,
but you're right. This is an apologetic in the making there. But yeah. I just so appreciate this conversation, Greg. It has been so wonderful, and I love that you have so many resources out there for people to continue on in this journey. So thank you so much.
It's been a real treat, and you're the consummate professional. It's wonderful chatting with you. So you're at home in this environment, which is great. And anytime for me or anybody else on my team, because we all have specialties. I'm more of a generalist, but we have people who really go deep in Islam and in the whole LGBT, transsexual, gender dysphoria area, in the justice area, and abortion and suicide. I mean, there are lots of things we cover that are really, really pressing contemporary issues. So I want you to know that we're at your service.
Thank you so much. Yes, we'll definitely keep in touch, and I'll look at some of those other individuals on your team. But thank you. I got to let you go here now that we've got these guys in the room. But thank you so much, Greg. I appreciate it. Man, like I said, I could talk to Greg all day long. He has just such great insights on how to have these discussions with people and how important they are. Again, No conversation is not worth having in all of this. It is not your job to do the work of the Holy Spirit and change their heart of stone into a heart of flesh. It is just your job to simply point them in that direction. Do you have any good tactics or any good discussion points? I want to hear from you. So make sure and reach out to me on Instagram and Telegram and share the ways that you are speaking and sharing your worldview with others. I want to hear and share with other people some of those good tactics that you listening out there might have as well. And if you haven't yet, head over to the Faithful Freedom merchandise shop. You can get there by going to wethepatriotsusa.org and follow and hitting the shop tab up at the top. You can check out all of my faith and freedom over fear gear. We also have a lot of great faith gear on there, so check it out. And I will see you next Wednesday on Faithful Freedom with Teryn Gregson.